my mouth and the meditation of each and every one of our hearts will please God, who is our rock and our redeemer. Every time we ask somebody, or nearly every time we ask somebody to be an elder, the response is almost always the same. It's this sort of, I'm not worthy, kind of, wow. It's a flattered kind of, are you sure there isn't somebody better than me? I can think of at least 6 people that would do a better job than me, that are more qualified, that, as Bill pointed out, that fit the description in 1 Timothy or Titus chapter 1 better than I do. It's always a humble, sort of step-back approach. In one sense, it's kind of like saying, I know I'm not those things described in 1 Timothy. I know I'm not those things described in Titus. So that's not me. I'm not the one. And that's almost always the first response that we get when we ask people to be elders. It's much better than, I know some churches, the response is, oh no, that's too much work. I don't want to do that. That's too much of a commitment. That's too much time. But here, what I found is that it's always a very humbling, kind of a selfless, sort of God-honoring, wow, sort of response. So my question is, are the expectations that Paul sets up in 1 Timothy chapter 3 and Titus chapter 1, are they realistic? Are they beyond? Are they too high? Are those expectations beyond our abilities? Let's take a look at what 1 Timothy says. And Jacob, you can bring that up on the screen. So let's just look through here and see what is Paul teaching us that a leader should be. He uses the term overseer, and I think in Bill's translation, it translated that bishop, and that's in Timothy. In the Titus translation, in the Titus section, they had elder, and they interchange it with this same word here for overseer or bishop, which incidentally is translated episkopos. Sound familiar? Episcopal churches have bishops as their leaders. The Greek term for elder, anybody have any idea what the Greek word for elder is? Sure, you're Presbyterian. Presbyter. Yes, presbyteros is the Greek word for elder. And so because we choose to call our leaders elders, we are known as the Presbyterian type of church. They are known as the Episcopalian church because they call their leaders bishops. So it says here that an overseer, and I'm just going to maybe I'll interchange between the term overseer, bishop, elder, and leader, because they all basically mean the same thing. Somebody who wants to be a leader, a church leader, has his heart set on a noble thing. This is a noble desire to want to lead God's church. And then Paul goes on to describe how is it that we'll recognize those who are qualified to be the leaders of the church. It says in verse 2, now the overseer must be above reproach. And then it goes on to list several other things. And I'll just take a second to talk about above reproach. Titus says blameless. These are all, they overlap. If you take these two passages and put them like this, they overlap very significantly. I mean, it's the same author. He's writing the same thing to two different people about the same subject. So you're going to have significant overlap. In Titus it says blameless. People read that and say, wait a second, I've sinned. Therefore, I can't be an elder. Do you think that that's what Paul is actually suggesting here? That the only people that can be elders are those who are without sin? If so, right, I've got to take off my robe. The elders have got to take off their ties. We've all got to go outside the back of the church because we don't even belong in the church. That is not what Paul is saying. Above reproach or blameless simply means that they are not being reproached for something, that they are not guilty or culpable of being reproached. They are not at a place where they can be accused of something. that they are living their lives in such a way that people are not accusing them of doing something that's wrong. So it says that they are not. They are above reproach. They live a life that people don't want to come and reproach them. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. The next one's fairly clear. It says the husband above one wife. That's pretty clear, but it's interpreted in at least 3 different ways. The husband above one wife, some people say this must be a man. It must be a man with only one wife. Some people say, no, it has nothing to do with male or female. It has to do with their marital status, that they are married and it's not polygamy. There's not multiple people in the marriage. There's not multiple wives or multiple husbands. Some people say, no, this has to do with divorce. Some churches will read this and say, no, somebody who has been divorced cannot be an elder, and they actually do not ordain divorced people. I personally believe that this has to do with polygamy, and in the Greek Roman times, where men had several wives, we're talking about a one-on-one faithful marital relationship. And I believe that that's the biblical model set from the very beginning with Adam and Eve. One man, one woman, faithfully married. And I think that's what they're talking about here. Not polygamy. I believe is the thing that's encouraged here. Temperate, meaning not overindulging one's appetite. Self-controlled, pretty clear. Respectable. Hospitable. We had an entire class on hospitality. Welcoming, friendly, meeting people's needs. Able to teach. There's one that a lot of elders struggle with. If they get nervous in front of people, or maybe they're just not good at teaching. They say, well, maybe that's not for me. Well, that's part of the reason that I'm here. I'm one of the teachers, and as we pointed out earlier, the elders have different gifts. And so we try to use the different gifts that the people have. Not given to drunkenness. I don't think that's asking too much. It's not saying you can't have a beer now and again. It's not saying you can't have a glass of wine. It says not given to drunkenness. Actually, some translations say not given too much wine. So I think it actually says the opposite, that you may be certainly free to have a glass of wine. Not violent, but gentle. Not quarrelsome. Not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well. This is one I think that a lot of churches struggle with, because sometimes you've got unruly children, don't you? Sometimes you were unruly children or are unruly children, right? But this is one I think that a lot of churches struggle with. That if an elder has a child who is a disobedient child, should we bar them from ordination or service as an elder? And this seems to indicate that that may be the principle. But children that obey with proper respect. Setting the bar pretty high, isn't it? I mean, it's not, I don't think that these are unobtainable by any means. People respect them outside the church, not a recent convert, or else they'll be conceited, and also have a good reputation with people outside. Do these things sound like they're unreachable goals? Not terribly unreachable, maybe a bit challenging. I mean, there's a broad spectrum there. But I thought, if we're going to look at the requirements of being an elder, I thought we should probably take the time and look at what's expected of all Christians. And so to do that, I thought we would just take a look at one chapter in one book. And that's Matthew chapter 5. All right, so think about all the commandments throughout the Scriptures, and I'm just going to take one chapter in one book and just a few pieces of that chapter. And this is Jesus giving his Sermon on the Mount. And we're going to look at the expectations for Christians and compare it to that of elders. So if we'll go to the next slide, we'll look at some of Matthew 5. Sorry. Before we go there, I lost my place there. Before we go there, the expectation of us, first of all, is to obey our leaders and to submit to their authority. Why? Because they keep watch over us. They help us. They help us on our way. And they will give an account for us as well. So we're to obey them so that their work will be a joy, not a burden. So let's go on to Matthew 5 and see what it is that Christians, now this is the expectation for Christians. Jesus says, "Let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your